Salete, and welcome everybody to this week's one and only virtual mentoring hangout. We may only be able to have one next week as well because I've got some travel issues coming up next week. And if we do have only one, it'll also be next Sunday. This week, with the holiday weekend, it just seemed like a good idea to have only one, but it also seemed like a really good time for our topic of the week, which is called Working the Unworkable. And I'm excited to have Brianna and Melissa with us from the beginning. Other folks I know are joining in. And also in the background, you may hear Jasper the Latin family dog, also known as Jasper the Wonder Dog, also known as Jasper the Ridiculous Dog, who has decided that he wants to be part of the show today too. But as I was talking with George Schreitz last week, right after the hangout, and he said, well, what should we do next week? I said, I have no idea. And he said, why don't you talk about working the unworkable? I said, what does that mean? He said, I don't know, but it's a really great topic. Figure out what it means and do that. So, and we'll notice George is not here right now, but we did talk, and he said, well, there's always that thing that is a problem, that thing that's always a problem every single year. And you always think it's going to be different this year. And you make all these plans and, whatever it is, whether it's that one classroom management issue, whether it's that, that one student who comes back and you're thinking, really? They're really taking another year of Latin? Really? And I don't know. They don't like me, even though I like all my students, and I've never disliked anyone ever, 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 right? But you look at the list, and your heart kind of sinks as you see that name. Or it could be, that one activity or that one part of the curriculum that it just never works out. Or sometimes, it might be, well, there's still no money for new books. I still hate this book. It still does everything the opposite of how I want things to do. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that the unworkable could be. And yet somehow, as teachers, we always seem to make it work. Sometimes we do this better than others. As I'm thinking of one of those names that I kept seeing on my list, somehow the kid became convinced by the end that I really liked him, and I was his favorite teacher and everything, and he grew on me. But when he was in Latin 1, he was just he was a ninth grader. Yeah. And he was a ninth grader, and he was also a ninth grader, and he was very immature, and he did some really stupid things, which he would freely admit later had been stupid, so that helped. But we always make it work somehow. But I think as a community, whatever that thing is, we can probably make it work better if we work on it together than if we're sitting in our splendid isolation thinking, well, what do I do? Because the one thing that we can think of to do is probably what we've already done, and if that didn't work, I mean, where are we going to go? So with that in mind, what is an unworkable thing or a problem thing for either of you guys that no matter what you do, it seems like it just comes back and it's an issue over and over again?
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. It's okay.
Oh, I was going to say I have trouble with the retention across like long weekends even. For example, we have a rotating schedule, so there's always one section that I'm not going to be able to see once every 6 days. So, I have some sections that I saw Thursday but won't see again until Tuesday. Right. And we kind of lose momentum. Same thing, I saw one group Friday and I'm not going to see them until Wednesday. And trying to keep the momentum and the knowledge still in their heads. It's not as huge a deal this early in the year with beginning students because there isn't much to hold on to. But later in the year, just trying to, because they're not going to study over breaks. And I don't know if anyone has any suggestions for that.
Well, I know that I tell this might not help you in your certain situation, but my kids won't do homework. They've got jobs, they've got lives, they have to go home, take care of babies, whatever they've got to do. So I'll tell them that I promise I will not assign them busy work, that they'll just take their time and my time grading if they will study 15 minutes a night. And then I have them record that 15 minutes a night that they study so that I can get like a parent sign off or someone to sign off, and you can tell when they come into class whether they've studied or not. But that's kind of a mutual agreement that you're going to work on it at home because you've got to work on a foreign language and you've got to practice it. But they're not going to sit and take, like, I can't assign books because we don't have enough. And they're looking at vocabulary and they're like, we don't want to do busy work. We don't want to do the homework. And I tell them, study your vocabulary, study your grammar notes, study something. Just make sure that you're picking up that notebook and reviewing for the quiz or the test that's coming up, or working on your project, or doing something 15 minutes a night in my class. And that generally tends to work out a little bit better. It kind of puts the impetus on them on what they need to focus. They, if they don't need grammar help, then they study vocabulary. And they know I'm available for tutoring, and I've even offered to take, students home from tutoring if that's what will help them. And they really appreciated that this year, especially in my environment now. And they want to come to JCL meetings where they don't have a way to get there, or they don't have other things that they need at home. So this year I provided notebooks and folders for them just to have it for my class. And if they find out if they have those little things that we take for granted, that makes a big difference in their world. And even just that studying 15 minutes in your little purple Latin binder, then that's going to remind you, oh, I need to work on the first declension. And that's what I found has help with the retention a little bit.
I think that's a really important point, Melissa, because we do forget. Well, once you've been in a situation for a while, you don't. But if you're new to a situation, or for those of us, some of our viewers who are new teachers, they may not realize what kinds of worlds it is that their students are coming from. And I think that for students in any situation, that idea of empowering them and saying, well, you pick the thing that you need to work on, rather than, well, here's this random thing that I've chosen out of this textbook that's meaningless even to me, but I just assign. Why did I assign it? I several years ago I had groups that were increasingly similar to your students, as you were describing them, and I said, look, we make very good use of the time in class, and at most, here's what I'd like for you to do outside. You pick the thing that you need to do, and you work on it, and you keep track of the time. So then now that I have have somewhat more advantaged kids that I'm working with, that's become track the time, and here are several options. But it still is a question of empowering them and making sure that they know that that it's about the learning rather than about completing one particular task. So I think that's a really important point. Brianna, is that helpful at all? Because I know that your situation is rather different from that.
Yeah, mine's definitely different, but I would love to find a way to, hold them accountable for that 15 minutes. I know in their music classes they have, practice logs, and they're used to reading logs and things like that. So there's probably some way I could try to hold them accountable over breaks and weekends and things, but I'm just not sure how effective it would be for 7th graders, Cause
well, I teach 6th graders, and I do the same thing with my 6th graders.
And are they pretty good about getting it done?
I have one class that is very good about retaining, and they're from the same school, so I don't see what the difference is. And the other class has a little harder time. I think it's their immaturity level in middle school, and their enthusiasm, because they're wondering, how come I can't say all these things to my friends in Latin when all the French kids and Spanish kids are able to talk to their people in Latin, in Spanish or French. So I found that if I give them the book, they're copying down vocabulary voraciously, and they're wanting to soak up that vocabulary just so they can say something to somebody else and feel like they're learning a language. And once they do that, they realize, okay, well, like a minimus, they start out saying, instead of saying my name is, they say, Vibrissa sum. And I was like, the Romans would never do that. And I said, book is made for 7 to 10-year-olds, and you are 12. You can learn the right way to say my name is in Latin. And so once I taught them how to say my name is, then that kind of clicked with them. They're like, wait a minute, she's talking to us in Latin. And I introduced the class in Latin, and I dismissed them in Latin, and I ask them how they're doing in Latin, and they have to respond back, so they feel that they're getting that verbal component in other languages, but they're eating up the vocabulary without really paying attention to the grammar right now. And I've got some of the more enthusiastic students who are actually taking a hold of the grammar and saying, wait a minute, this isn't how you told us it would be written in the book, or that the Romans would write it. I said, that's exactly right. It's because they're trying to gear you toward little kids, and you're much more advanced than that. So I keep implying to them that they are smarter than what the book gives them credit for being. And they're liking that. They're liking the fact that, hey, I'm smarter than my textbook. And so after reviewing a lot of things, I kind of give them ownership. I was like, my Latin kids are the smartest and the most talented and the most artistic and creative students, and I believe that. And I mean, I've been to JCL convention years and years and years, and I know it's for certain. And I said, you don't have to do everything every night, but show me that you're worth the honor that I give to you. And I respect you, so respect me by doing this work.
Oh, that's really excellent. That's such an important piece too, because so many kids in so many schools feel disempowered and disrespected, and when you can do what you're saying, Melissa, and show that no, you're smarter than the book. You're certainly, heads and shoulders above this or this or that. It is a wonderful feeling, and it really does build a sense of community among them, and it does lead to, because respect breeds respect, and high expectations breed high expectations, and so
Right.
that's just really excellent to hear. We should say salve to Ellie as she joins us. We've been talking about working the unworkable, and I was a little bit influenced actually by a post that you made on Latin Teacher Idea Exchange, I think, last week, about a thing that felt unworkable to you, although I gather it's gotten better. Is that a thing that you'd like to talk about, or is it too tender of a thing to talk about? Because I don't want to bring it up if it's a yucky thing still.
Are you talking to me or Melissa? Because I have no recollection of what you mean.
Oh no, I was talking to you, Ellie, about about your situation with the unpleasant kids.
The calling for parents post I made?
Yeah, that day.
Yeah, that was on my private feed. That's why I was confused.
Oh, okay.
No problem though. Yeah. So I had some. My thing that I've struggled the most with in classroom management is just keeping everybody on task, and because they're always having conversations with each other, always, and I really need to work on sort of getting on them every single time they're talking when they shouldn't be. So I ended up calling 4 parents last Wednesday because I had 4 girls who just wouldn't stop blurting out random things, talking, whatever else. One of them being very rude to other students at the same time. Mm-hmm. Calling the parents helped, but not a lot. I'm not sure exactly how much it'll have helped in the long term. The problem is, since they are, they're 15-year-olds, they're not super self-aware of when they even are talking.
Right.
So they don't always actually self-regulate well, even if they mean to. But that's what I've been dealing with. And then also this week on Thursday in a different class, one student, I had a student being my actor for TPRS, and she's a little bit lower energy than some. Or not even. She's like a normal student. And another student who's very, very high achiever got frustrated because it was going so slow, and she started saying, well, you should have picked a different actor because she never wants to do anything. She just sleeps all the time. And I just had no idea what to even do. I told her she needed to be patient. But yeah, so she was being really nasty to another student in my class, and I don't even know. Like I talked with the student who was being insulted. I talked with her mom, and I'm gonna have a conversation with the insulting student on Tuesday. But like I don't even know how you're supposed to deal with that when you have that kind of classroom environment where someone feels like they can go ahead and talk crap about another student right in front of you to your face.
Exactly. Ellie, I typed in on the corner over there a thing. I went to a workshop this week on for beginning teachers, and one of the things was with classroom management. And a lot of schools use Class Dojo, and it's very elementary. And I put in the site, it's livesschoolinc.com, and they showed us how to use it, and I just went on today and put my sixth graders in because I was having similar problems in my sixth grade class. And what I like about this is it's like Class Dojo, except you get to assign what behaviors each student gets credit or gets points taken away from for what they're doing, whether it be respectful or staying on task or being extremely helpful to other students or blurting out in class. You can set any of your you can set any of the actions that you want to give or take away points for and allocate the amount of points. And at the end of your reporting period or the end of the month or the end of the week, whatever you want, you run their tab, sort of. It's like the program will make out fake checks to them in the form of points. And they get to go into the system and cash in that check for rewards that they get in class. So it's teaching them the value of money as well as teaching them the value of having to earn the money, and they get the reciprocity of what money will do for you. So we were talking about how school is a job. School, you have to be professional at school, and teachers have to be professional at school, and students have to be professional at school. And that's why we have dress codes. That's why we have school uniforms. That's why we talk to each other as Mr. and Mrs. We don't call each other by our first name. And I really like this program because I could set up my rewards, and like 10 points will get a mechanical pencil that I'll give them, or if they get 25 points, then I'll get them a Latin notebook, or 15 points I can let them eat candy in class one day, bring it from home and eat candy in class. So it was just different things, but if you only are eligible for the small thing, then it will only light up the small thing for the kids so they know that they can't spend the money they don't have, and it'll teach them that if they want the higher incentive, that they have to do better work in class.
Have you tried this with older students? Do you get good buy-in with it?
I haven't tried it with the older students yet, and it's something that was just introduced to me, but I like the value of tying it in with money because they're learning how to spend money. A lot of the kids are going to get jobs when they're in high school because they have to do it. They have to work for home, or they have to work for other classes or play sports or whatever, but money is universal, and you have to understand money to function in the world. And I think it's teaching them behavior as well as a life skill. And I'm going to try it on my sixth graders this week to see how it goes before I introduce the ninth graders to it, and see if the high schoolers will actually buy into it. But the thing is that the program lets you create your own incentives. So you can ask your kids, say, what is going to motivate you to do well in my class? Because obviously the intrinsic motivation is not working. So you need to, they're going to have some kind of extrinsic motivation. And I was told to write down everything that they suggested, even if it's ridiculous, write it down so that it gives them some sense of hope that it might appear on their incentive wall. And then as a class, agree on like 10 or 15 incentives that can go on the wall and what they're worth, and that'll give them something to work for. But if the class has input on it, I think that it'll be more productive than if they don't have input on it.
I like
So,
that. I like that a
yeah.
lot better than any other incentive program I've ever heard of because of the ownership piece, because the kids get to decide, well, what is it that I'm working for? And they get to decide, is it a little thing or is it a big thing? Am I saving up my points for whatever, or am I cashing them in now? And they get to propose what the rewards are. I mean, of all the, and I've heard of a lot of incentive systems, but I think I like that one better than any that I've ever heard of. Oh, and Ellie, I'm so sorry because you were about to say something.
Oh, I was gonna say that I'm not sure that it'll work as well with my classes because I do have classes that are everything from freshmen to seniors in the same room,
Right.
uh, and that isn't always going to work. And also just I'm trying to avoid doing anything that makes too much extra work for me, and I feel like tracking all these little things is going to be something that I'm going to get argument over. I've been trying to do something with a DEA system, like Bob Patrick's Daily Engagement Assessment, because
Mm-hmm.
part of what I would really like, and I know this is ha 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 pie in the sky kind of dream, but I would like my kids to be listening in class because they know that that's how they're going to do well in my class.
Exactly.
Especially since I am doing a CI approach where they really do have to listen, and they will learn if they listen and participate. And
Mm-hmm.
some of them get that. Um, I don't really want to tie their behavior to rewards because they're already way too convinced that everything they do they should be rewarded for. So
Right.
they're giving me crap about candy I gave them last year. They're still saying, "Well, we shouldn't have to do this if you're not going to give us candy." And I'm like, "You are 16 years old or whatever. You're allowed to drive and hold a job. You need to be responsible enough to behave because you want to do well." So I'm kind of trying to avoid bringing too much of a reward system in just because it it just becomes one more thing to fight over with them.
Right. And
Um,
what I was
I think
trying,
it's a great idea for younger students, but I can't see it working with my particular population and my particular relationship with them at the moment.
right, I understand that. And I get what you're saying about not tying academics into behavior. And the thing that was
No, I'm fine tying in academics and behavior. It's rewards and
rewards and
behavior.
behavior,
I want
right?
academics to be the reward for the behavior, which again is pie in the sky idea, but with CI
Right.
it is really true.
Is your classes are your classes very similar to mine?
They are my demographics are predominantly white, predominantly lower income.
Are
Like
they like in the city or are they in the country?
no, this is mostly rural poverty kind of thing.
Okay, because I consider rural poverty and inner city poverty very similar.
Oh, they
Um,
are, yes.
and I've been given a lot of flack from the high school students as well with the in the high poverty situation, but I realized that they were doing it because some of the behaviors they were doing it was because they wanted the attention that they weren't getting at home, or some of it was because they didn't have the materials in class and didn't want to bring it out that they weren't prepared, and I
Yeah,
didn't.
I've solved that problem. Everyone has their own binder that I provide that stays in the room with the textbook. It has pencils, pens, erasers, and whiteboard markers in it, and it stays there. I provide any paper. I've gotten
Oh,
rid of that,
right.
and
Yeah.
I've gotten rid of them having their backpacks to root through during class by saying, "Can you have your bags at the back so I don't trip over them and die?" Because,
Right.
that happens. Um, and so I'm working on doing as much as I can, but what I really need to work on is my interaction with them and my catching the little behaviors that lead to the bigger behaviors.
Right.
And it's frustrating because it means that every time someone talks out of turn, you have to say, "Sorry, we don't talk out of turn in this class. We don't talk out of turn in this class." And you end up spending the whole class saying that. And it's just frustrating.
We've
But I
had
don't know. Yeah.
it is frustrating. I had a class a couple years, several years ago now that was like that. It was a weird mix demographically, and it was just a weird mix. Also, when I couldn't figure out what was causing it until I looked at their schedules. and they were almost all juniors and seniors. There were 33 of them, and 15 of them were coming from Miss Such and So. It was a second period class. 15 were coming from Miss Such and So. 10 were coming from Miss This and That, and Miss Such and So and Miss This and That were terrible. I mean, I don't like to speak ill of people that I work with, but they were terrible. The
Right.
other, yeah, there were 25 kids coming from that. The other 8 were coming from, different places, and they were fine. And as soon as I realized what it was, I said, I had an insight. And, and they're sort of looking at me. I said, because I looked at your schedules. And now I understand why you're coming in with the attitude that you're coming in with. And they sort of looked at me. I said, obviously I'm not going to say this out loud, but I think we all understand what I'm saying, right? And they looked at me. And I said, so what can we do so that whatever happened in first period stays out there and doesn't come in here? And we brainstormed about that, and they came up with some really good ideas, and we started doing that, and it got significantly better. It wasn't perfect right away, but it became, the thing about it was what Melissa had said earlier, all of a sudden it belonged to them rather than to me. It was their issue to solve, and they knew that I trusted them and empowered them and believed in them that they could solve it, which they hadn't believed before when I was. And I said, because, okay, here's the alternative. The alternative is every time somebody says something, I'm going to stop and correct it. And I would call that, we had a name for it. And so if people were being ugly, I would say, do we need to do that? And they would say, no. Or we would do that for 5 minutes, and I would say, are we done? And they would say, yeah, we're done, we're sorry. And, so what happened today that we weren't able to do the other thing? Do we need to add a strategy? So it became a thing that we worked on together. And it wasn't, it wasn't perfect, because Miss Such and So was just absolutely, she was abusive to those children. And Miss This and That wasn't great. She apparently spent 30 minutes out of 90 screaming at them about how bad, lazy, and worthless they were.
Oh.
So no wonder, if you've come at 7:30 in the morning, and from 7:30 to 8, Miss Such and So is screaming at you about you being bad, lazy, and worthless. Well, you're probably going to be in a bad mood, and you're probably going to want to talk to somebody about it, and and it can be as simple as that. And like I said, it was this huge insight for me. And all I had to do was, to look in the student information system, look at their schedules, and it's like, they have
there's definitely some of that going on, because the class where I had to call the parents is my last block of the day, and every other block rotates, every other block.
Right.
But the sixth block of the day doesn't rotate. It's the same every single day. So you have that class at the end of the day every single time, which means you always have them when they're tired and ready to leave and they're sleepy and they've been doing school all day and all they want to do is chat and relax. So what I kind of need to do for that class particularly is try to make class fun enough that they don't feel like they're being pressured. And I will be able to do that, and I can do that sometimes, but I've got to get them on board too. So maybe having a conversation about it, about like what they think listening looks like and what I think listening looks like, and maybe something like that would be a good idea.
Another thing that I've had, and this was in a middle school class, but I think it works well in upper school too, is a class log. So every time a student is disruptive or says something, does something, I would just point at the log. And they would get up and go and, write down their name and the time and the date and what they'd done. And then, the school policy was after a certain number of logs, you got a detention or something. But you wouldn't even need to do that if you just had them start keeping a record for a couple of weeks, and then you went over that record with them and said, hey, look, this is how often you've been disrupting the class. And then once you're pointing at the log instead of stopping the class, you can keep teaching and, keep the other students on task while that person goes and deals with writing down what they'd done. And you could also have them send an email home to their parents with you supervising it and CC you on it saying, hey, this is what I did today. If you have anything absolutely egregious happen, so that they're taking responsibility for what they're doing.
Okay, I really like that idea with the log, because if nothing else, and I'm saying this tongue in cheek, but it's true, they hate getting out of their chairs. So maybe they'll behave just so they don't have to get up.
Right. I have a form, and I can make a copy of it that is very similar to what Brianna was saying. I mean, yeah, Brianna. That the kids have to document their own behavior in their own words and why you reprimanded them, and you can give them the option that tell them the paper is going to be filled out. It can be in their words or it can be in your words. Either way, it's going to be documented, and they're going to choose their words over yours because you're going to be straight to the point and to the fact and get it out there. And they just really want someone to hear their voice for a little bit. So it gives you, that way you don't have to do the documentation. They've done the documentation. They realize that you're going to put it in a folder somewhere so that when you get enough documentation, you're going to send them to the office with all of their own documentation. And I don't think there's going to be a principal out there that won't support you if you have that much documentation of kids saying, I misbehaved because I was doing this.
I had a very similar form for many years that, and a process that we used that was a lot like what you're doing, Melissa. And then the other thing that I was going to say about that is that I also had a colleague who's been retired for a long time who, before there was reliable access to email, it was she was a strict old African American lady of the I will take nothing from nobody variety, and the kids loved her. But when they were bad, she would say, "Get your mama on the phone." And the phone was right there in the classroom, and it was next to the door. So they would have to go get the phone, step out in the hallway with the phone, call their mama at work, tell her what they had done, and then they would have to hand the phone to her, and she would make sure that it was actually their mama rather than time and temperature, right? And she would say anything that she needed to say, and it only had to happen once about every 3 or 4 years,
right?
Because because word spread, but because kids knew that she loved them and that she cared about them and she expected better from them than what they were doing, it was tremendously effective. And then the email serves the same purpose of having to email mom right then or dad or whoever, as does the form. The great thing about the form is that you hand it to the kid and say, I need this back by the end of the period, and then they can decide when they're going to fill it out. If they're mad right now, they can calm down before they're mad. They can, one time I had a kid who was just furious, and they did all kinds of things, and I said, can I have another copy of the form, please? And I said, sure, yeah, you can have another copy of the form. I'd highly doubt that anybody would want to read what you had written the last time.
Exactly.
And then the form, you photocopy the form or you scan the form or whatever you do with the form, and then you can email the form to the parent if you need to, as well at some point along the way if there's a continuing problem. But I think that it's such that also empowers kids because they know that as you were saying, that their voice is being heard, and that they are being they're being valued, that you trust them to explain to you what happened. And I mean, sometimes I've gotten those forms back, like if it's second or third tardy to class or something just really minor, and I discovered that there's an issue, Miss Such and So is consistently letting kids out late, or there's a huge congestion in this hallway, or this bathroom is broken or something, and then I said, well, clearly it's there's not going to be a consequence for you this time, but what can we do? Do you need me to go talk to let the office know that there's this huge congestion that's at such in the corner of this hallway and that hallway? Do you need me to check with the custodian who's in charge of that bathroom? What can I do? And so then voices are heard and problems are solved before they turn into big problems. And I think that's so important, is to just realizing that you can solve problems before they turn large and before they start feeling personal. Because so many times, if you have a kid who's just consistently talking over you every day, it starts to feel personal really fast.
It does.
It usually isn't personal at all, because they're 15 and they're just not thinking, or because they're 17 and they're self-absorbed, or whatever. But it sure feels personal, and any way that we can find to depersonalize it so that it's not about a conflict between me and whoever, but it's about us both working to solve a problem together. That's just a totally different dynamic.
Exactly. And I had a kid this week who gave me an ultimatum in class. And he said, this teacher or this coach wants you to write me a pass to go to the gym for your period. And he says to go get a pass from you. And I said, that doesn't sound like a way a teacher would address another teacher. And he said, well, I'll tell you this. Either you give me the pass to go or I'll get it from somebody else. And I said, I don't play with ultimatums. So because that puts me on your level. I said, I'm treating you like an adult and trying to get you to talk to me about what it is you need to do, and you won't even talk to me about it. So if you give me an ultimatum, then I'm going to have to give you an ultimatum because you're treating me in that manner. And I told him, I said, you can either, if you can choose to stay in my class, do your work, and get your 100 for participation today, or you can leave and get a 0. I said, that's my ultimatum. And he walked out of my class and ended up with a 0 and an absence for the class. And I talked to the coach later and told him, I didn't write him the note to go to where he was. He was like, well, he was lying to you because I didn't ask for anybody to stay after my class for anything. And so they're trying to see what they can get over on you, and sometimes to think. And you've got to realize that when you're professionals and you're in a professional situation, then someone's not going to ask you to give up your hour and a half so that he can go set up for a pep rally. They have that professional courtesy, and the students don't understand that yet. And if they want to be treated like adults, then they need to act like adults. And so I was saying, if you're going to treat me this way, then that's the way it is. But I don't get personal with them. It's like, this is business. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, because I'm going to just have to do more paperwork, and you're going to have to do more paperwork. And that's something that neither of us want to do. And I think the point was made, and I stopped and talked to the rest of the class after he left. I was like, this is a professional environment. Please treat me like a professional, because I am. And I'll treat you like you're a professional, because that's your job, is to be a student. And they really kind of responded to that. They were like, well, I would never have talked to you that way, Miss Travis, or I can't believe he said that, and I can't believe he just stormed out of your class without a note. And once you break it down to the rest of the class, you might have to make an example out of one student, but the rest are going to follow and take your lead, and they're not going to put up with the junk either.
Yeah, it really speaks to the important. Oh, sorry, we got some feedback. But it really, as you were saying, Melissa, it speaks to the importance of treating kids the way that they want to be treated, which is, like the young adults that they're becoming. And
Right.
sometimes that means, well, you did this thing, so here's the consequence of what happened. And sometimes it means, well, if you do this, here's what will happen, and just sort of talking through that. And sometimes it means structuring things so that it really isn't personal, because one of the problems, of course, when you're a teenager is that you take everything personally because you're a teenager, and so the what we have to do as people who are working with teenagers and helping them become adults is to learn it, and it's a challenge because we have to learn how to help them become who they're turning into, but we cannot do that work for them however much we want to, and yet we can't just sort of sit there and hope that it'll happen either. We've got, there's this incredibly complicated but wonderful thing that we have to do, and it's different all the time. I say this, and anybody listening to me knows that I love what I do, because if I didn't, who would put up with that kind of a thing if you didn't love what you do? Well, this is exciting, guys. We've got some really excellent areas of um, of focus, and we really have been able to help each other in ways that are really profound. Brianna, are you feeling better about your thing?
Yeah, I like the idea of having them do like a study log over. I might just try it over long weekends and breaks to start and see how it goes. I'll have to talk to the administration and see if I'm allowed to do that. Um, I'd love any other ideas if anyone has any additional ideas about how to bridge the gap over breaks and when you don't see the kids.
That's something I think we all work with, because when we come back from the breaks, we have to reteach procedures as well as reteach subject matter. And you don't want to really do both. You don't want to do either, just to be honest. And we keep having to go back and forth and back and forth. And I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with, is how to bridge that gap. And I have students this week, I was so down and out because in my Latin 2s, who only got through the red book last year, they want me to start with a green book in Cambridge now and skip an entire book. And I can't do that for my kids' sake, because they don't have the background. So I told them that I would start the green book in second semester, Lord willing, and that we were going to be doing reviews. And I was trying to get them to conjugate a verb, and they only knew 2 tenses, and not all of them knew 2 of the tenses. And then half of them didn't even know the difference between conjugation and declensions. They just called them endings. And so I had to reteach all my Latin 2s how to conjugate a verb, not just in English, not just in Latin, but in English as well. And so I think that they're losing a lot more than we lost when we were that age. I don't know if it's too much TV or too much time on the cell phone or too much something, but they're definitely not picking up and grasping and retaining all the information that they need to retain at a quick pace that they need to go, because I only see mine for 90 minutes every other day. And that's just not enough time to get through all the material I need to cover and go back and try to make up for what someone else has unjustly done to them, really.
Yeah, it's a real challenge when you have kids who have been treated so poorly and have had sort of chronically low expectations upon them from whoever, series of supposedly well-meaning teachers, but they clearly weren't well-meaning because they didn't think that kids could do what, of course, kids can do. And then that does, then it's like, well, what do I do? How do I make this work? And it does speak to the importance of empowering them. That just keeps coming up, empowering them and making sure that they have ownership of the process and saying, okay, well, guys, here's where we need to be by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where we are right now. You tell me how we can get there or close to there. You tell me, think about what we need to do. so that we can get from point A or point, we're not in point A, we're at point, point whatever we are, to point B that we need to be. And we should be at point A, but we're not through no fault of our own.
Right.
So how do we get from here to there? Learning how to involve kids in that is a big challenge. I don't know that I don't think I'm perfect at it, but, partly just because of the fact that, whenever you have the new situation and you're coming in as the new teacher, that doesn't happen. It's not like that happens every single year, but I did have the wonderful opportunity of getting to do that last year with as I was starting to do the online stuff that I was doing, and with the one program, which we actually grew it to the point that they didn't need us anymore, that they were able to hire a full-time teacher, which they had never been able to do before. And their part-time person that they'd had for many years was interesting. Interesting to say the least, in terms of expectations and in terms of classroom management and in terms of rapport with students and in many, many, many terms. But the great thing was the kids knew. I mean, they knew it was a problem. I said, well, okay, guys, here's where you are, and here's where, according to your state standards, you should be at the end of the course. Well, the Latin 1 kids were fine, but the 2s and the 2s were struggling, and the 3s were not quite where they were. You would have wanted them to be at the beginning, but by the end of the class, they were, and it was very much because I said, well, this is what I think, this is what I'm going to do, because this is a thing that I know will work. But I also really need to hear from you whether it is working, and I really need to know, what else, if there's stuff that is going to work, or if there's stuff that you want us to try, here's how you get the ideas to me. And so we had the beginning conversation, then we had the continuing conversation. We would stop, periodically and reassess: is this working? Is this structure working? Should we try something else? And then eventually somebody suggested a thing that worked really well for the 2s that I would never have thought of in 12 million years. I really would never have thought of it in the universe. They liked doing whole group sight translation, but they wanted, after we had read the sentence, they wanted me to go back and say it for them, and as I was translating each word, they wanted me to highlight the word on the text projected for them. I've never done that in my life, but I wouldn't have ever thought of doing that. Projecting the text as we were reading together. Sure, I do that all the time, but going back, because I said, well, do you want one of you guys? I said, no, not yet. We're not ready to do this yet. We understood it, but they said, could you just, after we do, after we've read it and understood it, and that we've understood it, could you just go back and, say the Latin again, say the English, and point to the words as you're saying it, as you're translating them. I said, well, of course I can do that. That's no skin off my teeth, right? But I never would have thought of doing it.
Yeah, I would never thought of that either.
But they were very intelligent Latin 2 group, and they were very far behind where they needed to be. So it really worked well. They loved it. They were really excited about it, except for one kid who was very angry at me because I was not her beloved old former teacher. But everybody else was, and she really didn't need as much support as the others did either. But everybody else was just like, oh, this is the best thing that has ever happened. And so then we found a thing for her to do in place of that, and then she was fine. But something as simple as just saying to kids, well, tell me what you think will help, because they know, they know themselves by that point. They know themselves quite well, and they know perfectly well this will help me or this won't help me. And so then you can really get to the point of being able to say, well, it's our, this is our structure, this is our thing that we're doing together, rather than this is that, that thing that Mr. Schwam is doing, or that thing that Mr. Harris does. And it really makes all that ownership of the process makes all the difference. Is that helping for you, Brianna and Ellie? Are you seeing ways that you could apply that?
I'm still getting to know my kids, so I don't know what this group is going to be like. But I do like the idea of ownership. I always explain my rationale behind, every task I give them. Hey, this is why I'm telling you to do this. This is why I'm asking you to do this. Even though it may seem silly, this is, why. So that they're always participating in the ideas, and the rationales behind how I teach. And then I do give them time, periodically throughout the year, time to give me feedback. Hey, is this working? Is this not? What would you guys like to see more of, other than games and no homework? Is 7th grade. But I try to give them as much input as possible into the class so that I can teach to what they what works best for them. But we're only a week and 3 days into our classes right now, so I'm still getting to know how these kids learn. So I haven't set anything in stone for the year.
Do you have any inclination of having them do a multiple intelligence test? That way you can see which ways they actually do learn best, and maybe you can cater to that. Or put some of your groups together, like put some visual learners with some auditory learners with some kinesthetic learners, and that way they can help each other, because just as well as I do that you don't truly know something unless you can teach it to somebody else. And I try to put my high translators with my low translators, low skill level translators, so that the high ones can perfect their skills and help the low students raise their ability to translate. I did that with my Latin 3s one year, was to do the multiple intelligence test to say, hey, if you are musically inclined or logistically inclined, then maybe we need to play some music in the background in class while we do our classwork. Or if you are kinesthetically inclined, like when we do adjectives, I bring out my Play-Doh and we do an activity with a Play-Doh. It just helps to find out where they are in their multiple intelligences so that we can best differentiate toward their needs.
Yeah, I just try to cover all of the intelligences, in a day. I try to do as much as possible with all of them.
Okay.
To try to address everybody. I think that they have done the testing. I think they did it in an earlier grade, 5th or 6th grade. I can't remember. I'd have to talk to those core teachers. I don't know how much time I'd have to pull them out of class to do that. To pull them out of the curriculum to do that. And then trying to look at 70 multiple intelligence tests would be interesting. But I do keep that in mind, because I do know that is something that a lot of the kids need, is all kinds of different inputs. Right. Even if they lean towards one kind of intelligence, it helps to get it across all of the different types.
Right, exactly.
I do a 10-minute survey on day 1 that just asks them to agree, but on a strongly agree to strongly disagree scale, with like some very simple descriptors that give me a very rough sense of what the intelligences are, and they do it as a Google form. So then I can't lose the paper.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I do too. I don't do it as Google Doc, but I'm like, okay, number from 1 to 10, tell me, rank these events in number from 1 to 10, and then add them up. Oh, if you've got this many number A's, then you probably would learn best with flashcards, or you might learn best writing things over and over again, or repetition, or you might study best in this type of environment, or you might learn better in this kind of environment with the kids, just so they know what they are, not necessarily so you know what they are. But I know when I was growing up, I had my room set up the way that I would learn, because that's where I did my homework. And I know that I don't do homework well with music, so the radio wouldn't be playing, but my sisters would be blaring. And it was a completely different 2 kids that were growing up in the same house that learned completely differently. So even just to get a rough estimate and say, raise your hand if this was the most that you had, what, maybe take 10, 15 minutes out of a class and do it.
Yeah, I could
Yeah.
also see if we could use an advisory period to do that. Get some Chromebook carts out or something,
Oh, that would be
and
great if you
try
had
to get
access
the
to
kids to do
Chromebooks.
it in advisory. But again, I'm just going to have to see what they have done in the previous couple of years, because they've been focusing. This group has been focusing a lot on brain training and the resilience project and mindset, and so I know they're pretty cognizant of how they learn, but I'm not sure
Oh,
if they've
okay.
done them. I feel like someone told me they'd done the multiple intelligences, but I'm not confident. So, but I'll definitely look into that, because you're right. That would be a good way for them, again, to be more introspective and take ownership of how they're learning.
And if you have the results, then the results are on file somewhere, and you can go look at them. And not necessarily for every kid, because if the kid is doing well with what you're doing, then you know that you're reaching them. But for those kids who are struggling, um, I had a more I have a somewhat more intensive thing that I do. If it's clear that a kid is struggling, and it's a few weeks into the school year, and I don't have paperwork on them, for a particular learning disability, or I don't have an IEP or a 504 or something, um, then, but they're clearly not, they and I are on different wavelengths, then I just want to know what it is, what am I not doing, or what am I doing that you're not receiving, so that, so that it does become a shared responsibility. And that's very empowering for kids too, to be able to say, well, I've always struggled with this. I had a kid one time who told me, I have never been able to do that stuff that's in the middle levels of Bloom's taxonomy. I can do the bottom stuff and I can do the top
Mhm.
stuff, but I can't do these two layers in the middle. I've never been able to do this. And I had a 504 at one point for the fact that this was a struggle for me. I said, well, this is good information. Now I understand. So I need to either not ask you to do those things sometimes, and then other times I kind of need to scaffold you up to them, right? And she was like, yeah, that would be great. So, how do you do this? I said, well, next time we do, I don't want you to do it, but I'm going to pair you with such and so, and I want you to stop them and ask them every step of the way, what is your thought process? And then I warned such and so, okay, Louise is going to be stopping you every step of the way, and asking you about your thought process, and that's why I have paired you guys specifically, because I know you're not going to get upset. But just so you know, there's a method behind this, there's a purpose behind this. We're working on something. Is there something she can help you with? And the kid was like, yeah, actually there is. So those kinds of things are hugely, they don't take a lot of time. I mean, you can do them in the course of an activity that you'd have kids doing anyway, but then you learn so much about them, and they learn about themselves. And again, you have an issue of what seems to be unworkable. I mean, to my student who I've nicknamed Louise, not her name, she had struggled with this forever. She had never felt good about the sort of middle rungs of the Bloom's taxonomy ladder. She could do the top and she could do the bottom, but she just, for whatever reason, had a very specific processing issue with um, the sort of application and analysis level stuff. And she knew where the problem was. I mean, she could identify it, absolutely. So then we figured out how to work up from things that she was comfortable with, and how to work down from things that she was comfortable with, in order to get her to the point of feeling comfortable with it.
I just posted a link for anybody who's interested. I just did a Google search of multiple intelligence assessments, and this is the one that popped up for an assessment if you're interested in doing it in your class. This is the one I found quickly. It was like the fifth one down on Google. So just in case you need to see that, then that's available.
Thank you for that. I'll check that out.
Yes, that is going to be so helpful. Thank you. And I'm going to put the link over here on the idea exchange page as well, so that once it loads, so that people will be able to see it. Since they can't, for some reason, I thought that they could see the chat in the recordings, but a couple people have told me that they could, and a couple of people have told me that they couldn't, and I don't know why.
I've never been able to see the chat in the recordings at all.
Okay.
So
there you go. Okay,
on the
so
computer, the iPad, my phone, and I've never found it. I've pressed every single button, and it just never shows up for me.
well, evidently it doesn't actually show up at all, but somebody told me that they could see it. And I was like, were they lying? Did they just not want to make me sad? You know what? I wouldn't be sad. I just need to know. So let's see.
I did have a victory this week.
Oh, excellent.
I can share that my class is, since we're getting ready to do the SLOs this week, the Standard Learning Objective Test, and they didn't want me to actually start teaching the second chapter of the book at Minimus. So instead of having my sixth graders go, I had them read some and figure out the difference between singular and plural. And then they got to the story of Medusa and Perseus. So for one class, I told them the myth. The second class, I had a bunch more students who wouldn't pay attention, so I showed them one of the myths on YouTube. It's like, I can't remember. It's like the ones about the heroes quest that they do on YouTube for all the mythical heroes, and I showed them the mythical quest for Perseus and Medusa, and then we made a mosaic in class, a big mosaic. I mean, it was like the size of like La Bocca della Verità, and of Medusa, and I had like a little sweatshop going on in my class where they were cutting up mini pieces of construction paper and actually making a mosaic of the Gorgon Medusa as it would look on the Aegis. And the other teachers looked at it and were surprised that the sixth graders could even cut out squares that small. So I had two classes work on it for 3 days, and it worked really well to fill in some time, but it also taught them about culture, and it incorporated art and incorporated a lot of different things into the lesson. And one kid told me, she said, "Miss Travis, I can't do this because of my religion." I told her, I said, "Sweetie, this is not about religion." I said, "This is about culture." I said, "You're learning about art and culture right now by doing a mosaic. So I'm not trying to make you believe in the gods. I'm not trying to teach you to believe in the gods, but I want you to learn how to make a mosaic." And she said, "Oh, okay, I can do that." And as soon as I put it in that perspective for her, it was like, I'm not trying to convert you to paganism. I'm trying to show you what a mosaic looks like. And I showed them pictures of mosaics and went through that, and it turned out very good. And I just got a lot of compliments on it, and they even laminated it for me, so I'll have it for years to come. And we're going to put it up on the board at school in their art board. And I thought that was a great way to do some cross-curricular instructions with my little kids. Well, I had the time and couldn't really teach them anything grammatically. I could teach them something about culture and mythology. So they appreciated that, and I had my sixth grade advisor knew that I was getting fed up with the situation I've been in. And I called in a sub on Tuesday. I was just having a horrible day, and before school even started, I told them to call me a sub. And she was like, "We can't just call you a sub." She was like, "The kids need you." She said, you've already taught them so much, and if you were to leave, then we would be losing a big asset. So I felt very appreciated in that form, because even though they still haven't figured out my pay and overworking me and all that stuff, I know that the other teachers appreciate what I'm doing in the classroom. And they appreciate what I'm doing for the kids and how I'm empowering them and trying to teach them something different. But administration still doesn't see that quite yet, but the other teachers do. And that's one step closer.
And that is a big victory. I'm so happy. That's really excellent news. I wish that that the administration and that the central office people would figure out their pieces of the puzzle for you. But I'm glad. I mean, it really is important. It's so important to feel valued and to feel validated, um, as a teacher and of course as a student too. I mean, we keep talking about these things as if they're as if they're different, but in a lot of ways they're not. I mean, the same things that our kids need, to be respected and valued and have ownership of the process are the same things that teachers need. I'm really grateful, every week as I'm sitting down and thinking about, planning these sessions. I'm just grateful that we had, that I happened to have this set of conversations at ACL, and that I happened to go to that one session, and that we decided to do the first one of these because we're making a difference for each other,
Mhm.
and it is exciting. I mean, I'm so grateful to be able to do that, to have the small little part that I do of creating these links and announcing the topics, and maybe saying something periodically as we help each other solve problems. It's just it's a real joy for me, and I'm glad to be able to give back. After years of receiving and years of you know developing some kinds of expertise with something.
Now, would you recommend, Justin, for someone who hasn't been to a lot of teaching seminars? I know I've done things through the county, and I was very big in JCO when I was younger, but I have never been to an ACL meeting. Would you would you rather someone do ACL over flag or flank or something like that if I had to pick something?
I mean, I'd hate to tell you to have to pick. One of the convenient things about ACL is just the fact that it's in the summer, so you don't miss school.
Right.
Um, it's and also it's the organizers really work hard to make it as affordable as they can. There's always a dormitory housing option. They're in relatively inexpensive places. I mean, Austin, where it is this next summer, isn't cheap, but Austin is cheaper than a lot of places. And
Right.
the as I have gathered, from talking to the committee, they just really, there was one conference center that was suggested to them, and they said, no, we're not going to use that because it would be too expensive. So they're
Right.
very cognizant of the fact that that it's expensive and that people are going to be paying partly or entirely out of pocket, and even if they get reimbursed by their district, it may be a while before that reimbursement check comes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of there's I would recommend ACL for a lot of reasons, partly because too, for first-time attendees, there are a couple of scholarships that will cover
Right. That's what they
registration
told me.
and travel costs and stuff, and so that would be something for you to look at. And those deadlines are coming up, but they're not like around the corner. So
Yeah, they're
I,
usually in March or something like that, right?
yeah, they're I think so. I mean, there's a couple of different ones, and I don't remember when they are, but certainly after the total cost has been announced, so that you can know what you're applying for. And sometimes state organizations will also have some money to send people. State classical organizations will have some money to send people to things like that too. I would really recommend it. The year the first time I went to an ACL Institute was at the end of my first year of teaching in the summer of 1993, and we drove from North Carolina to Boulder, Colorado, because we couldn't afford to fly.
Right.
And we stayed at Motel 6 on the way because we couldn't afford anything better, and we had a cooler of something in the car because we couldn't afford to eat. But well, we could
Right.
afford to eat, but and then we stayed in the dorm, and we ate the not so great food at the University of Colorado. Well, it was okay, but I'm sure it's better, today than it was in 1983. But it was such a feeling of oh, I'm surrounded by people who understand where I'm coming from, who want to help me. And
Right.
then after that, life got busy and young kids happened and stuff, and I didn't go to ACL for about 10 years. But when I was back, it was like, oh, welcome back. It's good to see you. You know, we've missed you. Um, you've always been part of the family. And so from, you know, rough about 2004 or 4 until now, I think the year that it was at Loyola Marymount, I did not go because I have some family in LA who had warned me about the food, and they were like, "No, you don't want to go there." But other than that, you know, it's just really become a big part of what I do in the summer, and it's the most professionally enriching face-to-face thing I think that I do. You know, I mean, I might go to another conference, but um, but I think because you learn great things in the sessions, but even more so, um, um, you you meet people and you see them face to face, and you have these conversations with them during breaks or over meals or whatever, and it really builds a strong sense of community, the kind of thing that we're trying to do here that we've achieved. But it's easier face to face. It's, you know, it's not impossible um, online, of course, but it's certainly easier face to face. And you know, those 3 or 4 days in wherever in late June and early July they can be really empowering and life changing. So I would say, yeah, if you can possibly afford it, or if you can possibly get some funding to help with it, I would really, really encourage anybody to go, because then once you've been, then you can see the value, and then you can either, you know, sell it to your school or your district, or you can eat beans for a month, or you know, whatever you need to do in order to try to get yourself there. Um,
I would recommend also staying with the local organization as much as you can, your state organization, because they're going to have a good line on the standards and what's required of you that you won't necessarily get at the higher level of ACL. So, like I work with OFLTA here in Oklahoma, and trying to, you know, speak for Latin in, you know, some of our discussions um, of the standards, and trying to, you know, make sure that they're still going to apply to, you know, to our field and everything. And I know that it can be hard to navigate without that local, you know, help. And it could also be good for you. I don't know how many local Latin teachers you know, but if you can go observe them, if your school will give you time to go observe the other Latin teachers and what they do, that can be really, really helpful. Just seeing how somebody else teaches the same thing you do. I don't know if you already do that or not, but it can be really helpful.
Yeah, there's only one other teacher in South Atlanta, and they've suggested I not go see her. And the other teachers I know are in North Atlanta, and it takes about an hour and a half commute to get there during the daytime. So it's not one of those great options that I have, like to have someone next door that teaches the same thing, or to even have someone in a nearby school that teaches the same thing. But I would love to be able to join groups. That's why I like this one so much, because I'm able to connect with other Latin teachers. And I'm connecting with foreign language teachers every day, but they don't teach Latin. And we're a horse of a different color. And they even cut the 5 C's down to 4 C's for us in Georgia, because they said that we don't have communities. And I was trying to explain to them that, you know, when I taught in North Carolina, that they included the communities portion, but it was including going to JCL events, or having your Latin club event, or encouraging kids to compete in contests with other kids that take Latin. And they just were insistent that we don't have communities in Latin. And I thought that was a real misnomer on their part, but I can see where they're saying that we don't have anywhere to study, like Argentina or Spain or Portugal or wherever the countries are that their students are studying, and their culture that they actually get to talk about, whereas ours have to be adapted specifically for us.
I think that they have a very strange misreading and understanding of the community standard because that's the strand because that's not really what it's not about going to the country or going to the wherever. It's about using the language outside and using the language and the culture outside of the school setting, which I think the North Carolina
Exactly.
standards, do a really good job, both the old ones and the new ones. Having worked with both for a long time, of saying, these are ways in which you meet the community strand, and here are some standards and some tasks for that. So I find it weird that the state of Georgia doesn't understand that. Well, no, I guess I don't find it weird because
Yeah.
no, I don't find anything weird anymore after decades in this business. Nothing surprises me anymore.
No,
But
and I
it
told them,
does,
I said, with Latin Club, I can meet that community standard.
yeah, I mean, of course you can. And, in any time that you do cross-curricular stuff and any time that you have kids thinking about the relationship between Latin and their heritage languages or their heritage cultures, you're doing that too. So well, just because your folks don't understand what you're doing doesn't mean that you can't do it.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
but that is so strange. That is just weird. Um, we're a little bit shorter than we are sometimes, but on the other hand, we've covered an awful lot of ground. Are there other celebrations that we should bring up, or other topics that we should address today before we close?
I had a funny moment where I heard from another teacher that apparently the new seventh graders, by the end of the first week, which was only 3 days, had decided that mine was going to be the easiest of the seventh grade core classes. So I thought, I'm not sure if that's a victory or not, but I thought it was pretty entertaining.
It's definitely entertaining. That's great. Um,
As long as they keep thinking that.
Exactly.
yeah, let them keep thinking that. I had my first week with my online homeschool groups last week, and they're wonderful. I mean, I have 10 new Latin 1 students who are just fantastic, and then all of my returners, my 2s and 3s, are great. And I'm looking forward to seeing my babies, well, virtually seeing my babies in New Jersey next week, who are not babies because they're it's a combined upper level classes Latin 3 and 5 group this year, and they're just fantastic and wonderful, and I'm looking forward to seeing them. So it's a good time. I mean, the year I think is off to a great start. Then my next step is to finish packing up the rest of this stuff, because we're in that weird place of that we've got accepted offer on the house and contract pending and everything, and we're just waiting on a closing date. And we've resolved the one thing that of course, something has to come up because they were all, oh, we can close it before the end of August. I said, no, you can't. But I think we actually will be closing it and moving before the end of September. So if there's a weekend that you all see, so sorry, there won't be a virtual mentoring thing because Justin is frantically removing the last of the crud from the house, where the Schwab family has lived for the last 11 years. Just, think good thoughts about us. Anything else before we close?
Not really. I've enjoyed this discussion group.
This is really excellent, and I'm looking forward to, I don't know what we'll talk about next week, but I know we'll talk about something. And I feel like, we're enjoying it, we're getting to know each other, and we're doing good for each other, we're helping each other. So that's really, really important. So I think if we're all good at this point, I'm just going to say, Valete omnes, have a wonderful week, and we'll see each other next week at the same time and the same channel and talk about something important that has arisen out in the course of the week.
Okay, well, I tell names.
Hey, Wale.
Wale.
Wale.